Welcome to the Tom Sense Show. We have got a packed hour right now. Canada decides to play tough on trade and immediately finds out what happens when you try to bluff a powerhouse. The Department of Justice gets caught hiding the ball on Don Lemon. And Big Tech gets hit with an $18 billion bill for getting your kids hooked on glowing glass. Quick reminder before we get rolling. We take questions right out of the chat on YouTube while the broadcast is happening. You do not have to wait for the end. Drop a question in the chat whenever it hits you. If it is sharp and worth talking about, I will bring it straight onto the air. Let us get into the news. Our neighbors to the north have apparently decided to learn the hard way how world trade actually works. United States Trade Representative Jamieson Greer went right onto Canadian television this week and set the record straight after Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney tried to claim the Trump administration blew up a bilateral trade deal with 11th-hour demands. Greer made it plain. The United States offered Canada an unprecedented framework, and Ottawa backed out over implementation terms at the very last second. So President Trump put a 50% tariff on $20 billion in Canadian goods. And how did Canada respond? They got mad. Mark Carney is threatening dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs on American steel, dairy, and consumer goods. Ontario Premier Doug Ford is pulling American liquor off store shelves like that is going to bring Washington to its knees. Greer confirmed there are 0 open communication lines right now between Washington and Ottawa, and he gave them a crystal clear warning. Any further retaliation will be met with immediate reciprocal American measures. Right back at you, Common Sense 144. Thank you for being here with us on the show. All right, moving on. Here is the plain reality Canadian politicians do not want their voters to understand. Canada ships 3/4 of its exports directly into the United States. Threatening a trade war with your single biggest customer when they buy 75% of everything you make is not tough negotiating. It is locking yourself out of the grocery store because you did not like the price of butter. A federal judge in Minnesota is taking a hard look at the case against former cable host Don Lemon, and the Department of Justice is suddenly on the defensive. United States District Judge Laura Provenzino just ordered federal prosecutors to hand over full grand jury presentation slides, witness transcripts, and every single communication they had with the grand jury. Lemon was hit with federal charges under the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act after showing up to cover an anti-immigration and customs enforcement demonstration at a church in Minnesota. His defense team says the Department of Justice cut serious legal corners and committed major ethical violations to secure the indictment. The government insists everything was totally above board, while Lemon's team says it is unconstitutional retaliation against a working journalist. Now, you all know where I stand on Don Lemon's brand of commentary, which has never been my cup of tea. But look at the standard here. The Department of Justice spent years weaponizing grand juries against political opponents and insisting that nobody is allowed to peek behind the curtain because the process is sacred. The second, a judge asks to see their homework, prosecutors start sweating. If the government actually followed the law and presented clean evidence, turning over the grand jury slides should take about 5 minutes. We have an update now on the catastrophic disaster in the Himalayas along the border between Nepal and China. The confirmed death toll from that massive glacial collapse and flash flood has now climbed past 165 people, with more than 1,000 still reported missing. Disaster authorities in Nepal report that over 150 bodies have been recovered from the Rasua district alone. The Trishuli River completely broke its banks after the collapse, washing away entire mountain settlements, highways, and concrete bridges. Emergency response teams, international rescue personnel, and United Nations humanitarian crews are trying to move heavy earth-moving equipment into the border valleys, but the roads are gone and communications are completely severed. The missing include hundreds of foreign trekking tourists and pilgrims from the United States, Britain, Australia, India, and across Europe. Officials on the ground are warning that the death toll is going to rise significantly as rescue teams finally dig into remote mountain villages that are buried under tons of thick mud and glacial debris. It is an absolute tragedy of massive proportions in one of the most rugged places on the planet, and our thoughts are with the search crews working through impossible terrain right now. We have the latest now on the massive legal showdown between Silicon Valley and the states over youth mental health. Meta Platforms has agreed to pay $18 billion in a nationwide settlement with a bipartisan group of state attorneys general. The lawsuit charged that Mark Zuckerberg's company intentionally designed Facebook and Instagram to addict children and teenagers to their screens. Under the deal, approved by United States District Judge Yvonne Gonzalez Rogers, Meta is forced to put hard limits on adolescent accounts. That means a mandatory 2-hour daily usage cap, a total shutoff from midnight to 6 in the morning, 0 push notifications during school hours, and much tighter age verification. Meta managed to avoid admitting any wrongdoing in the deal, but $18 billion is real money, and it goes directly into youth mental health remediation programs. Big Tech spent a decade telling parents that endless scrolling was just harmless digital connection, while their engineers built algorithms specifically tuned to keep 12-year-olds hooked until 3 in the morning. Handing over $18 billion and agreeing to lock the apps at midnight is the corporate version of pleading guilty while paying cash to keep the mugshot off the front page. One of the biggest names in the modern art world has passed away. Japanese avant-garde artist Yayoi Kusama died in Tokyo at the age of 97 from multiple organ failure. Her studio in the David Zwirner Gallery announced her passing, closing the book on a 7-decade career that completely changed contemporary visual art. Born in Matsumoto back in 1929, Kusama moved to New York in the 1950s and became a central fixture of the 1960s pop art explosion. She became famous worldwide for her hypnotic polka dot patterns, her massive yellow pumpkin sculptures, and her immersive infinity mirror rooms, which drew lines around the block in every major city on Earth. She transformed personal mental struggles into visual work that made her the top-selling living female artist in the entire world, commanding millions of dollars at international auctions. Look, modern art can be a bizarre world filled with pretension, but Kusama was different. She had a signature style. She built an undeniable empire on her own terms, and people actually showed up to see her work in person. 97 years of doing exactly what you want and making the entire global elite pay top dollar for it is a serious run. We lost another genuine television original this week. Veteran entertainer Jaye. Morgan passed away at her home in Washington State at the age of 94. Younger viewers might not recognize the name, but Morgan had an incredible career that spanned 2 totally different eras of entertainment. In the 1950s, she was a chart-topping big band vocalist with major hits like Life is Just a Bowl of Cherries and That's All I Want from You. But in the 1970s, she became an absolute household legend as the sharp, unpredictable celebrity panelist on Chuck Barris's hit game show, The Gong Show. Daytime television back then was chaotic, unscripted, and wildly entertaining, and Jaye. Morgan was right at the center of it, banging that giant brass gong and keeping audiences laughing with raw comedic timing that you just do not see anymore. Modern television is so sanitized, focus grouped, and terrified of offending anyone that an uninhibited personality like Jaye. Morgan could never even make it onto a daytime set today. She came from an era where entertainers were allowed to be funny without apologizing for it every 15 minutes. That is the news this hour. I am Tom Sense. Stay sharp, put America first, and I will see you right back here next time.